Hey, good morning, good afternoon, I should say, everybody. It's about 12:13 on this TGIF Friday, May 16th, 2014. And recently I've been reading something off DeviantArt. It's a little conversation that some fan had put up between himself and Ken Penders. A little bit of a chat, if you will. And it was very intriguing to read this. You see, basically what this fan was doing, just to give you the quick summary, was explain the situation to Ken Penders about, how fans were disappointed in the removal of his characters, how they felt that he was partially, if not mostly, to blame, along with Archie and Sega, but to also explain to him what the current plan is by these fans, and that is to petition and do the best they can to get Archie and Sega to say okay, basically to get Archie and Sega to eventually say, okay, we'll bring the characters back. Now, during this conversation, Ken Penders, and I'll provide the links down below, but Ken Penders basically told this fan, he told this fan, hey, look, I have nothing against Archie and Sega using my characters. He pretty much said that Archie and Sega could use his characters as freely as they want, but there are a few conditions. Like one, certain characters could not die, like Julie Sue, Linda, Lala Sue, I believe, and whatnot. The other condition, of course, is if they were to kill off any certain characters that were important, that they'd have to go over with him first of how it was going to be done, and if he would, sign off on it. Basically, they would have to say, okay, basically, this is how he puts it, in my opinion. This is how he puts it. Like, if they were to use, let's say, Linda once again, but they were going to kill her off, they would have to go to him and say, okay, we're going to kill off Linda, and this is how we're going to do it. Which means he would either have to agree to that, sign off on it and let it happen, or he would reject it and say, no, you're not going to kill Linda off, or maybe even give input like, okay, if you're going to kill her off, this is how you should do it, and not the way you want to do it. Stuff like that, from what I can understand. So basically they would have to go over with stuff with him on that. And then also it has to be acknowledged that, from what he's told this fan, that Locke, Knuckles' father, official death in the comic, and I'm just checking my time here, Locke, Knuckles' father's official death in the comic, takes place in an earlier issue than what it did when Ian Flynn did the Urajak Reborn saga. So yeah, that's basically some of the conditions, from what I can understand. Now, when Ken Penders tells this fan the same thing he's told a lot of us already, that Archie and Sega are free to use his characters, again, with a few conditions. I look at it like this, and this is just a theory. Hear me out. This is just a theory on my part. But I believe there's truth to both ends. I believe there's some truth to what Ken says when he goes and says, hey, Archie and Sega could use my characters as freely as they want with a few conditions, but I also believe there's some truth as to why Archie and Sega don't want to. See, there's a theory, and that is, on both ends, they want certain things. They want to use the characters, they want to see and use the characters in certain ways. For example, Archie wants to see the characters again, and they want to use the characters in certain ways, but the problem, and this is just my theory, they want to do it, they want to do things with these characters in certain ways, I want to put these characters through certain storylines and angles and all that, but the problem is they're afraid it's something that Ken Penders may not like. With or without his approval, he may not like C. On the other hand, when I hear Ken Penders say, hey, you know, they could use my characters as much as they want, with certain conditions, like I mentioned, I think there are other hidden conditions as well. And those hidden conditions go back to a certain storyline that I've talked about that he pretty much came out and said is canon to the original timeline before the whole worlds collide, countdown to chaos situation. Or the whole Mecha Sally, worlds collide. Okay, basically before the whole Genesis, worlds collide, Mecha Sally, countdown to chaos situation. Pretty much he says, hey, Mobius 25 years later is canon. And I think that's one of those hidden conditions, or maybe one of those conditions that he didn't mention to this fan, that I think he would like to see done. He would like to see something similar, if not totally Mobius years later, be acknowledged as canon to the timeline. And again, this is what my theory is. The theory on his end is my theory when it comes to him is, yes, he doesn't mind if his characters get used. He just believes that the reason they don't want to use them is because they don't want to acknowledge certain things as canon. More importantly, they don't want to have to acknowledge a future timeline as canon. That's pretty much why you don't see these characters anymore. Because pretty much it would have to be, basically the thing is, there would have to be an agreement. Now we don't know all the details because apparently both sides have said the same thing. There are certain things they cannot divulge. Or divulge, whatever you want to call it. There are certain things they can say and they cannot say. And that's fine, that's perfectly okay. But and again, that's fine. It's perfectly okay. That's the legal system for you. But the thing is, I believe both sides have a reason, and the reasons that I've just mentioned as to why we don't see these characters right now. One is because Archie and Sega probably do want to use them, but they want to use them in a certain way that Ken may not agree with and may cause trouble again. And Ken doesn't mind seeing them get used, but feels that the only reason they're not being used is because Archie Comics and Sega doesn't want to use or doesn't want to acknowledge certain stories or future timelines in stories as canon. I know it sounds a little confusing maybe to some, but that's the way I look at it. And the only way it's going to work out is you have a true balancing. I mean, here's what I think could be done. If there was a true balance between the two sides, here's how I see it could be done. You could have Archie Comics do Mobius years later, but do more like a, how is it done for Marvel? Have more of a Marvel and DC, have more of a what-if scenario. This is like, what if Mobius years later? Do something like a what-if deal. Like you got Sonic Universe, right? You did Mobius years later in there. Do a what-if storyline. Say, basically acknowledge and say, what if this happened 25 years later or 30 years later? And I think that might work. Just say, okay, this is what happened. What if this occurred 25, 30 years later on Mobius or on Sonic's planet? What if 30, 25 years later Sonic and Sally were married? What if Bunny and Antoine were married, which they are? What if this? What if that? This is everything that I think when you look at it could be possible, but yet is not. All because of this, all because there's no balance between both, there's no balance between the sides. There's no balancing, there's no, oh, well, I agree with this, you agree with that, okay, we balanced. There's no balance. There's no, compromise. basically. And to me, that is the biggest thing they need to do. I think that's the biggest obstacle they got to get, both sides got to get through. But my theory, honestly, is the fact that both have a reason why they're not using the characters. One, because like I said, with Archie comics, they want to, but they want to do it in ways that they feel Ken Penders may not agree with. And on Ken's side, yes, he doesn't mind them being used, but he wants to see certain things acknowledged as canon, like Mobius years later. I know that sounds crazy, but to me, those are my theory. That's my theory. Those are my thoughts, and that's my theory. You know, you may or may not agree with it, but it's the truth, in my opinion. So, again, I'll provide the link to the conversation between the two individuals, and you kind of give your own theory. You kind of make up your own theory, kind of get your own theory going, or your own thoughts going when you read this conversation, because it's quite intriguing. And you might kind of agree or not agree with what both have to say, but, you know, just sit back, read it, enjoy it, and see what you think of it. And that's all I'm going to say, folks. But again, these are just my theories, my opinions. That's all I'm going to say. Comment below. God bless, take care, and I'm out.